Right, so a little bit about myself before we start, just to let you know a little bit about who I am. So as Vilma said, I'm Nigel Budd. I work for a company called Clearvision. I started life many, many years ago as a developer, writing contact center software. A lot of C programming and things like that back in the day. Had great fun. Started to be a team leader, eventually got to be a development manager, had a small stint as a test manager along the way as well. And also along that journey, discovered Agile, ways of working, running projects and delivery, which was a fantastic change. Someone just said I never stopped being Agile. Like, absolutely right, Terry. I wrote a bit of Python just last week. It's still there. Still have fun doing it. So did that for many, many years, and then had a change of career about 7 years ago, got into the Atlassian ecosystem as a consultant, and I now run the Agile practice at Clearvision, which is now part of Eficode. So just in case you hadn't heard that news, I was asked by our marketing team to include a slide just to remind people. Clearvision were acquired by Eficode a few months ago. So we're really pleased to be now part of this powerhouse, this DevOps and ITSM powerhouse that is Eficode, and also why I'm wearing yellow for the first time. It's also my first time speaking at the DevOps conference, so I'm really pleased to be here. So my talk today is about Water-Scrum-Fall and how to escape from it. And I'll just start with a little bit of an introduction to it, just in case you haven't heard of it, but it is so prevalent. I'll be so surprised if any of you in the audience hadn't heard of it. But this, just make sure everyone's got on the same level as me and we've got the shared understanding. Otherwise, it'll cause all sorts of confusion. So typically, it's a version of the waterfall model, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, starting with perhaps some requirements at the start, which are gathered together as a batch, as a large set of requirements that the customer wants. Probably then goes into some sort of design phase. And again, we're designing and architecting the solution around all the requirements as one phase. Once that's completed, there's another phase gate, which then moves into a build or implementation phase. This is where the developers start making the code and making the magic happen. This is the bit where the Scrum fits in. There tends to be some sort of agile way of working here, maybe delivering in sprints, Kanban maybe, but some sort of iterative development. This adds a lot of value. It certainly means that you can track progress, you can perhaps get feedback, perhaps having backlogs, perhaps having cross-functional teams, Scrum Masters, product owners, those sort of things could all be coming in at this phase, and fantastic if they are. We're starting on a journey of agility. But that's where it stops. And quite often then there's a handoff to verification, and that happens as a separate phase. The developers maybe go off and start something else at that point, maybe get involved if there's faults or bugs or something. And then after verification, there tends to be some sign-off. Might be a bit iterative around that bit, although it's not shown on this picture. It might go backwards and forwards a few times to development. But after it's got to a certain quality level, then there's deployment. And again, there's a phased deployment. The verification team and the developer team pull the pin on the grenade, throw it over, and the deployment teams then have to work out how to get it into production. So that's what Water-Scrum-Fall is. It's a hybrid mix of Agile and Waterfall traditional. And a lot of organizations are doing this. And I did a little bit of research before my talk. I was inspired by the talk, by the way, talking to the customers I talked to, but I did a little bit of research just to think what the press think about this. And it's actually quite a real thing. I think Vilma mentioned it was mythical, but it's not. It's real. It's the reality. We'll have a look at a couple of articles from the industry press, the IT press. These people are saying it's the norm for development. It's on the rise, according to GitLab. It's not a declining framework, it's an increasing framework. And this one, my favorite one, is the reality of Agile for most organizations. And based on my own interactions with customers, I tend to agree with these articles. It's almost like a framework of its own. It's just not an official one. Between ourselves, I had a quick look on Amazon just to see if anybody had written a Water-Scrum-Fall How to Succeed book before making this presentation. No one has. There are a couple of books that come close to suggesting that they've got a way of making it work, but they didn't quite come out with quite as blunt a statement. If anybody in the audience is making this work and wants to collaborate on a book, I think we could make a lot of money, though, if we could make this successful. But the trouble is, it's not successful. It's not an optimal process. It's a hybrid mix of two quite different approaches. So there's no way it's going to be working. Before we talk about why it's not working, let's talk about why it's prevalent, though. So the most common reason is that probably this little transformation, and it's what it is, it's an agile transformation, it probably started in the development team. Scrum, after all, was created to help software developers produce better. That's why that framework it came into existence. It was in development. So although Scrum alludes to how you get things into test, into production, how you design, how you gather requirements, and things like that, it really wasn't that focused on that. It was mostly on the actual development builds, iterative development, incremental development approach. So it's not really surprising it doesn't quite fit in those other areas so seamlessly as it perhaps got adopted in development. You might be struggling with legacy products and architectures. They make it very difficult to change the ways you're working. If you've got a legacy product that maybe is difficult to test, or you've got no automated testing on it, it takes a lot of manual testing to get it to release. If that's the case, it's very expensive to do incremental. We've just changed one story. Let's do a test to make sure it all works. You can do risk-based testing, but it's very difficult to get that confidence of the regression testing. So quite often it alludes or encourages a sort of a batch testing, multiple features all being delivered at the same time in order to get the economies of scale for going through test. Transformations are really tough. They really are hard work. People will be changing their jobs. Organizational structures will be changing. Your tooling will be changing. Needs money. It takes a risk. That's why transformations are quite tough. And that alludes to the next bit, which is the leadership support. If you're going to transform the way you're working, if you want to change your organization, you need some leadership support to make that happen. And that doesn't always exist. Sometimes the transformations are just in the development team. The wider organization kind of nods and looks at what the developers are off doing, hears them talking about sprints and scrum masters and things, and just lets them get on with it, but doesn't really understand what they're trying to do. Contracts with your customers, we'll talk a bit more about those later, are tough. If you've got a fixed scope contract, it kind of makes sense to deliver it all at the same time. It kind of encourages you to think of a batching of delivering of work. That can make things very difficult. It removes all that agility and that flexibility that you've got when you're working with backlogs. And lastly, this is all too real, and I know this one personally. You've got a day job quite often. If you're the development manager, say, or test manager, bringing in agile ways of working to your development teams and testing teams, you've probably got enough on your plate with your day-to-day job, the next release you're trying to do, the next fix that you're trying to get out to your customers, listening to your customers, listening to your staff. Well, dealing with technology changes, everything that you've got on your day job, plus a transformation is just too much. It's just not going to happen. So it's not really surprising that Water-Scrum-Fall is absolutely prevalent in our industry. And it's very challenging for organizations to escape from this trap, this rut that they've got themselves into. But what's wrong with it? Quite a few things, really. And this is why I've got this talk today, and why I'm hoping this is going to be a little bit of a call to arms for organizations to say, it's not good enough where we are. We do need to change the way we work. We do need to transform. Hence, we're on a transformation track. So, slow feedback loops, typical of the waterfall model. We've got a requirement at the top. We get all the way down to the testing, probably through several different teams, the designers, the developers, right to the testing. The testers go, is this right? It doesn't seem to be right. And then it's got to go all the way back up to the top again to check whether they're right or wrong or something like that. It's a very slow feedback loop. There's a lot of stage gates between the process, a lot of handoffs. It's very difficult. It's not very efficient. It's definitely not optimal. Batch sizing is absolutely key. I'm going to talk about this as a spoiler alert a lot. Batch sizes are very passionate to be. As an agilist, we want to try and get efficient flow through the organization. But this Water-Scrum-Fall approach encourages large batches of work to be delivered all at the same time, all the way through the system. So it's a problem. It isn't an optimal way of working for your organization. Speaking of which, it also causes bottlenecks. That's one of the disadvantages of large batch sizes. We've got something having the requirements gathering. There's a period of time going on while this happens. we're going through a design phase. There's a period of time while this happens because you're working on a lot of things. You've got a bottleneck. You've only got so many designers, so many architects. Get through to the testing. That's probably another bottleneck in your organization as well. You have too few testers generally in order to get efficient throughput of work right the way through. This fixed scope, I talked about that before, that takes away your agility completely. So many times I'm meeting developers who have to complete an item of work because it was fixed. Someone said I needed it, it was contracted. They know it's not going to be used, but they're still having to plow on and deliver it, and it's heartbreaking for them. They're not motivated to do it. We're removing all of the agility from the teams through this way of working, through this framework. The risk is all at the end as well. Get down to the testing phase, you might be thinking, great, project's on track, we got it out of development in time. Get to test, suddenly hit problems. Now the project is in peril. We don't know when it's going to be released. We start getting into that loop where it's looping backwards and forwards to development. They do a fix, they do a release, they break something else. It's pushing all the risk to the end, to the testing, to the deployment phases. If then you hit problems in deployment, you're right at the very end of the process. It's very difficult to recover from. It's very time consuming. It's very expensive to recover from that as well. A few people in the chat are mentioning GitOps and DevOps and things like that. You're absolutely right. Those are the things that are designed to try and fix these problems, definitely. But with this Water-Scrum-Fall approach, they're not always introduced. And then handoffs. Not only are they inefficient, having to hand off between teams, the designers then have to tell the developers what it is they've designed and the miracles they've created and things like that. The developers have to hand off their, the wonderfulness to the testers, things like that. But also it removes a lack of collaboration between those teams. Suddenly that work that's passed on to the developers from the designers is the developers' problems. Developers pass on to the testers, now it's the testers' problems. It's not always seen as someone or a team accountable for the delivery of these value to the customers. It's someone else's problem all the time. And quite often it's the project managers and things like that that end up taking the ownership, not the people delivering the product, not the people necessarily talking to the customers as well. Some people who are quite abstract from those positions. So there's a lot of challenges with this. Again, this is why I'm saying it's not right. We need to fight against it. We need to escape from this model. Two kinds of ways of making the change happen, really. The first is there tends to be some sort of calamity. Something went wrong. Project got delivered late. Something was delivered at poor quality. Your competitors have released something that is way above what your current product is capable of, or something like that. You're going to start losing ground to your competitors. Those are the sorts of calamities that make a change, make us trigger an organizational transformation and change. That's how I got into Agile. Between us friends, I delivered a project almost a year late, and that was not good enough. It was awful, in fact. So I ended up, changing the way we worked fundamentally because of that. It was a good lesson in making something happen. The other approach, though, is an easier path probably, is if you have some sort of inspirational leader, perhaps someone who's been through an Agile transformation or worked in an Agile organization before, someone who can come in and say, this is what I want, this is what I make happen, this is one of the changes I want to make within an organization. And they tend to be pushing down an organizational change outside of development, covering the whole organization if possible. This is rarer. But when you do see it happen, it is incredibly powerful because you've got the buy-in from those stakeholders and those executives, hopefully right from the very beginning. And it's someone who's pushing down, removing barriers. Why I'm talking about this is for anybody who's trying to help an organization transform at whatever level. Could be a developer, could be DevOps, could be development manager, it doesn't matter. You're all responsible for making the transformation happen. But it's good to know what's causing this transformation to happen, because it helps you understand what the aims are, what problems you're trying to fix, and also, more importantly, what support you're going to get. We'll come to talk about the support you need a little bit later. As always, in any kind of IT development, DevOps, whatever, it's this magic trinity of your people, which is the culture, and the values that your staff live. It's the practices, the ways of working, whether it's Scrum, Safe, whatever, it doesn't really matter, DevOps, GitOps, but it's those working practices, and then all of those two supported by the tool that are important. Tools never make a transformation happen, but they certainly act as a really good foundation level to support things like a transformation and improve ways of working and improve practices. You need to consider all three in order to make your transition work. Let's talk about the people. And the first tip, if you like, of how to escape is we are going to need some help. I mentioned before that people are often too busy. Your development manager is running development projects. They don't have time to transform an organization. So you need to establish some sort of center of excellence. Sometimes it's called a lean agile center of excellence, an agile practice, agile PMO. I heard so many different terms for this, coaching school. There's loads of terminology. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's a group of dedicated people, just a small number. Doesn't need to be a big group, but some people who are responsible for making that transformation happen within an organization. Quite often they'll need to be external parties, or at least have some support from external parties, like external consultants, things like that, people like Eficode. Because you want people who are not part of the organization. You want people with different experiences, people who are not going to say, well, that's the way we've always done things in the past. People who are not stuck in the politics of the organization, power battles that are going on, things like that. Frankly, they're not trying to be friends with anybody either. Some people will get upset during this transformation. I think it was Jeff Sutherland that said, if you're doing a digital transformation, agile transformation, and someone's not threatening to leave, you're probably not doing it hard enough. Take that to heart. You are going to upset people. You are changing the organization and roles and people's responsibilities along that journey. You have to. That is going to upset some people on the way. Those people can be outside of that, which is great. Doesn't have to be permanent, maybe 18 months, 2 years or something like that. The idea is then to push this responsibility into the organization. Once they've got the skills, they will then pick it up. Good transformations happen from within, not without. It's not external pushing that make it happen, but they can certainly support those early stages of development for transformation. This establishment also means that someone's going to put some money into it. It's going to cost some money, and that tends to mean you are getting some sort of executive buy-in. CEO, the CTO, someone like that is going to put some money into this. It also means that they're going to be supporting this team on that journey as well. So where there are blockers, where there are impediments, that executive stakeholder can hopefully get involved and try and remove them. Needs to establish itself with a clear mandate, a charter, if you like, some set of rules and some set of ambitions that they are wanting to achieve. Again, written quite often with the executive, so we've got this shared agreement of what their mandate is. It needs to have a clear focus of what it's trying to achieve. Should use some clear measures. We'll talk a bit more about this later in a separate section because it is so important, but it's important for the organization to know why it's transforming and what it's hoping to achieve as a result of the transformation. More on that later. Let's go back to our Water-Scrum-Fall model, and let's talk about some of the people we're affecting on this journey. So let's move to the right, the verification and deployment section. Now, this should be, in theory, the easiest bit, because this is generally groups of people who at least report to IT. Maybe they've got the same leadership as the development arm as well. Maybe you've got a development manager, test manager, but they certainly should be part of an engineering practice or something like that. They should be on the same side. These two being at the right-hand side of the process are probably also the people who are getting squashed and pressured at the end. So, if development overruns, the milestone doesn't change, but the verification team of the deployment, they're the ones who are going to get squashed because of the development overrunning. So they're probably feeling the heat the most as well. And what I'm trying to say is they shouldn't need much motivation to get on this journey of making a change or trying some new way of working that might make their lives easier. As we are at a DevOps conference as well, I'm hoping some of the speeches you'll hear over the next couple of days should back this up. But, there's all sorts of DevOps and GitOps practices that should help these teams work. I'm talking automation, test automation, deployment automation. Those are the things that make these two teams more efficient, more repeatable, safer. And that makes quite such a difference to these teams as well, if we can invest in it. But it's not always easy. You can't just make that happen. If you've got, say, a monolith application, that's a very difficult thing to test using test automation. So maybe there needs to be an investment in breaking that monolith architecture down into microservices or something like that, some testable components that you can test and release and deploy separately. Those sort of investments are tough because, you know, they cost a lot of money to do. They might need you to gain new skills that you haven't got already, and investments that don't actually, your customers don't necessarily notice much difference or improvement from. Of course, your customers are going to get a lagging improvement if they're getting features delivered faster or higher quality or something like that. But, you know, at its core, they're not going to notice any functional differences. So that makes that investment in changing your architecture, existing architecture, quite a tough discussion to have. And again, this is one of those traps that I think a lot of organizations fall into with Water-Scrum-Fall, why they're in there and can't escape, is sometimes those investments into re-architecting just don't get made. There's always something more important. There's always a next release that is more important than the improvements that you need to make these things happen. So just they never happen. They always get put on the back burner. Let's move to the left. Start with our customers. There's a battle as well. I mentioned right at the start that, you know, fixed term contracts, you know, they suck all the agility out of us. They basically mean we have to deliver all these items, whether or not the customer needs them. And that's the thing, we lose that feedback loop of giving the customer what they need rather than what they asked for 6 months ago. There is such a huge breadth of difference between those two things. You know, quite often with a good agile team with a good feedback loop will develop just enough stuff to satisfy the customer needs, but no more, because they've got enough, they've given them the value, and then they can pivot and start working on something else that's higher value for your customers. So you're delighting your customers because you built that delight process into Agile. Having that fixed set of scope ruins that completely. If you can persuade your customers to work in a different way, they will get such a benefit. They will get exactly what they need. But you are going to have to think about organizing the contract in a different way. The contract will basically say, rather than if I give you this cash, you give us these features. The contract is, you give us this cash and we will give you a certain amount of our time and we'll deliver what you need based on this backlog. But we might vary it depending on your need and your feedback. It's a very different way of writing the contracts. But if you can persuade the customers, you get such success out of it. And I have seen it done a lot of times. Design phase is also very tricky. It's very easy in a way. Sorry to any designers out there, but it is easier to design if you have a whole suite of requirements to design all in one go. Think of it a bit like designing and architecting a house. You know, you've got some plans. You know that what the foundations need to look like. You dig a hole, you fill it in with concrete and stuff like that, and then you build the walls. Yeah, it's a very fixed architecture because you've got that whole big picture all at the start. It's very easy to paint out what those foundations need to look like. But the trouble is, it's not very flexible. Once that concrete's set, carrying on with that analogy, it's very difficult to change. If somebody wants another bit added, you know, another garage extension or something like that, or an outhouse, you've got to come in and perhaps break up some of the foundations and build more stuff and lay more concrete. It's going to be expensive, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. So agile ways of working encourage agile design practices, flexible designs, loosely coupled architectures and components, things like that, that help the software be developed in a way that is flexible and adaptable and embraces change. You know, the Agile Manifesto promise of welcoming changing requirements even late in development, that really has to start on this left-hand side level with the requirements and the design. It's so fundamental. If you don't do it at this level, everything else that follows is going to be, you know, having to accept those design decisions and those fixed requirements that you've made at these points. The leadership are their next set of people. Now, these should be some of the first people that the Centre of Excellence, the change team, the LACE, whatever they're called, need to have a target of training and educating and perhaps coaching. These teams, the leadership teams, need to live the Agile values. They need to have a deep understanding of the manifesto, the principles and things like that, and also why the organizations needed to change. Middle management also need to feel comfortable and supported and trained on this journey. Quite often they're excluded. So the senior management set the vision, the middle management are the agents of change. Trouble is, for those agents of change that are the middle management, they're quite often feeling a bit uncertain about all this. They talk about self-managing teams, self-organizing teams, about restructuring management levels and making a leaner organization. They're feeling their jobs under threats, frankly. So they're going to resist this process. So they need to be persuaded that it's all okay. They're on board the process, what's best for them and what's best for the business to be part of. Change is happening, it's inevitable, they've got to be part of it. But they are going to be nervous and they need that support for the journey. If they are not on board, then they'll disrupt it and it might not happen. And there will be a point somewhere during the process where there is a problem, a challenge, an incident, some failure, some late delivery, something like that. And they've got two choices at that point in time. They can stick with the program, the training, the agile way of working, or they can go back to the way they were before, command and control and telling people they need something done by Thursday, etc. You could spend months and months transforming, you can ruin it all in a couple of hours if you don't have the right people and the right support and the right training in place. Project management teams are next on my list. They're also going to be feeling nervous. They should do. There's no real project management role in Scrum. I'm not to say they're not useful, but they are not managing the project anymore. You've got product owners who are managing the backlog, doing customer communications. You've got your Scrum Masters who are accountable for your performances of your teams. There is less and less work for these people to do. The team should be self-organizing their work, meaning less command and control. Project managers are going to feel displaced a little bit in this process. They still are useful. You could use them for managing risks and issues, managing dependencies. Well, although teams should be optimizing themselves to remove dependencies, but while there are dependencies, it's helpful if people are there to help manage them. They may need to do stakeholder comms as well as the product owners. They might need to do reporting, things like that. So they still have uses, but they're quite often supportive functions now, not managing functions. They might be supporting the product owner in the ways they're doing. It's not the job they signed up for. They are going to feel out of place. So, be aware of this, be sensitive to it. They might find other roles. They're very good at product owner roles quite often. So, they can still contribute as people to the organization. It's very important. But just watch out for them disrupting, things like that. I did have an organization who was doing agile transformation that employed a bunch of new project managers halfway through, and you think that you just got things completely wrong by doing that. It's the wrong message you're sending out. And this leads me to the next one. Everyone else in your organization, you try to do an organizational change to support this development arm, the value stream that we're trying to deliver. Start with HR. So HR actually really should be probably next in line after leadership for some of the lean agile training that the lakes are going to be delivering. If you don't, how else are they supposed to know what sort of people we need to recruit? We want people with growth mindsets, not closed mindsets. We want people who understand perhaps some of the agile ways of working, who are flexible, adaptable, T-shaped people as much as possible, as they describe it. There's flexible people who turn their hand to a few things. If you don't train the HR teams, how will they know what sort of person you want to recruit? How will they know what the skills for a Scrum Master are or what an Agile coach does if they don't experience this? So maybe the HR teams should be one of the first teams or departments to start working in the Agile ways. They could certainly manage some of their own backlogs of work on a Kanban board, being transparent, being collaborative, being predictable in the work they're producing. Fantastic way of starting. Helps their own efficiency. Finance quite often control projects through budgets. That's a real firm way of controlling and removing agility out of a delivery team if they control the money that they have. So finance need to find new ways of financing development. Quite often this is value stream funding in some of the scaled agile terminology. They still have guardrails because of course they're protecting the investment that the company are making, but it's just different ways of supporting that development and different guardrails that they're using rather than a fixed scope time of, again, similar to customer contracts. We'll give you budget if you give us these features. Again, removing the agility. And then finally, marketing. Marketing are now not necessarily releasing predictable backlogs of work. We're not going to have a new product a release of our product that's got these new 10 features in it, because those might change throughout the process, throughout the journey of creating this new product. So maybe they need to be more flexible. Maybe they need to be more incremental as well. So they're learning and being closer aligned to the development teams. So maybe they market to a small group of audience of customers for the first release, which might not have so much function in it. But as you add more features, maybe they add more and more marketing and do perhaps a continual marketing approach rather than great big bang marketing that they might have traditionally done in the past. A lot of the new sort of social media allows that sort of thing to happen. Digital marketing enables a lot of that to happen, but they need that closer alignment to the development teams in order to happen. So it's not just the development arm we're talking about. There's all kinds of other units within the organization that also need to be part of this change along that journey. We're going to make a transformation, and it probably seems at the moment, if it is just the development team in the middle that's working in an agile way, like the rest of the organization is just a mammoth, complex task. But the good news is, dealing with mammoth and complex tasks is the one thing that agile was designed to break down and fix. You break things down, big problems down into small chunks of work, deliverables. You deliver them incrementally. You get feedback loops, you understand what the impact of the changes you're making are, you use measures, you get some empirical evidence about the positivity of the change, etc., etc. You don't need to change the whole organization in one go. Start with a team, start with a department or something like that. You need to just do it incrementally. And the magic thing is that when you start making these changes, you start getting successes, people will notice. People in the rest of the organization will see these high-performing teams. Make sure they get tons of praise heaped on them as well for being amazing. Other people then want to be part of that. They'll want to be elite players and high performers. So they'll want to be in. They're removing all the barriers themselves at that point. It's a bit like a snowball. Snowball rolling down a snowy hill. It'll gradually start move quite slowly to start with, but it'll gradually build up momentum. It'll gradually build up size. It'll gradually build up speed. Once it's done that, it'll be unstoppable. And that's exactly the situation you want to be in. And because as the organization grows in its capability of being agile, more and more people will have the skills within the organization to carry that forward, to train others, to evangelize, to promote, to help, to assist. That center of excellence I talked about with some external parties gets replaced with internal staff. That's really when it's working. Talked about measuring progress right at the start. This is really vital. And you need to, at least at the start of the process, identify some of the measures that matter to your organization, depending on the problem you're trying to solve. Benchmark these, and then as you start making the change, start monitoring that measures to make sure you're getting the right effect. Some examples, just to help along the way, perhaps lead time, which is the time from a customer request to the time they get it. Maybe cycle time, which is the amount of time it takes us to build and deploy something. These are fantastic agile measures. And if you can decrease those, you are delivering value to your customers faster. And maybe one of your customer complaints is that they're having to wait a long time for things. If that's the case, lead time, cycle time are fantastic measures. Customer satisfaction, should be measuring that. Maybe your uptime metrics, maybe the number of failed deployments, maybe your quality metrics, such as number of bugs found in various places, test customers, etc., etc. Number of support tickets coming in. We're at a DevOps conference. There'll be quite a few talks, I hope, about measures along the way. These are the sorts of things that you want to try and introduce into this process. Not too many, just 2 or 3 key performance indicators are useful, but they're the ones to try and keep an eye on. You can always change them. Along the way, just make sure you're measuring your employee happiness as well. You want to bring people on the journey. I've said already, you're not going to make everyone happy all of the time. There are going to be people who are upset on this journey. Of course there are. But as long as the majority of people are happy that they're seeing improvements, you're doing the right thing. So measure that. And there's quite a good correlation between these metrics as well. So if you are deploying faster, but your bugs are going up, or your failure rate of deployments going up, you're not doing it right. Something is being broken, some shortcuts or something have been taken, you're missing a quality step. So you do need to make sure you've got the correlations between the measures. Bowen put it better than I could. Are we building the right product? Are we building the product right? And how quickly are we building the product? Really, when you boil measurements down, it's those 3 that you need to be coping with. My last tip is about batch sizes. I mentioned before I was going to talk about batch sizes a lot. Agile encourages small batch sizes in order to improve the flow, remove the bottlenecks, things like that. Waterfall inherently encourages large batch sizes. We need to break that habit. And really, fundamentally, if we're escaping Water-Scrum-Fall, this is what we have to do. So if you release every 6 months, challenge the organization to release every month. If you release every month, challenge the organization to release every week, every day, every hour, as fast as you can. Just keep challenging the organization to release faster and faster and faster. That way, you're forcing a reorganization. You might get more cross-functional teams to reduce handoffs and dependencies. You might have to invest in automation. You might have to invest in leaner processes, reducing waste, things like that. But just keep reducing batch sizes. Thank you. These are my summaries, my takeaways, and then hopefully we're going to come over to some Q&As. Welcome back, Vilma.
Thank you, Nigel. That was amazing. One thing that I was thinking that was great that you said that Water-Scrum-Fall has become this framework of its own, and it's becoming a reality in the organizations. Yes. And maybe leading me to the question, I think we have time for one question, is that would working with safe and proper increments count as Water-Scrum-Fall?
Oh, fantastic question. What a lovely question. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with SAFe. There are some excellent bits about SAFe, but I have seen it implemented so poorly that, yes, it's turned into quarterly releases, which, yes, it could be Water-Scrum-Fall. The way I'll answer that is at the bottom level of the SAFe big picture, there is Scrum, effectively, at the teams, and there is deployments on it, releases. Quite a few people forget that releases, and quite a few people think that when you get to the end of the PI, you release, and that's not the case. It's got to be a continual process, and it is there in the diagram. On that same subject, another soapbox moment for me, some people assume you just release at the end of every sprint too, which is also crazy. It's the worst time to release. You release when stuff is ready. If you release something after 2 days of a sprint, fantastic. If you release 3-4 times in a sprint, fantastic. That's what you should be doing. These boundaries are not release points. The releases are continual. So SAFe, it does encourage it, but some people interpret it wrong. Those quarterly PIs for me are just alignments. They're just a point in time to say, hey guys, let's gather together, let's have a party, let's talk about what's coming next, let's make sure we're all aligned. And that's a great way of introducing sort of SAFe and just making sure it's all working. But yeah, it's very easy to mix the two together.
Hi, we're from Eficode, the driving force behind the DevOps conference.
Regardless of where you are on your DevOps journey, there is always the next step. With our experience in successful DevOps transformations, we're excited to support you in taking the next step.
Find us at eficode.com and have an amazing time watching the talks at the DevOps conference.